My name is Jerry Gill. Today is November 19th, 2010. I'm visiting with Leonard Court on the Oklahoma State University campus in Stillwater, Oklahoma. This interview is for the O State Storage Project of the Oklahoma Oral History Research Program. Leonard, I know you're really busy in your profession, and appreciate you taking time to come and visit with us today.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
You've had an incredibly rich and lengthy relationship, to say the least, with Oklahoma State University, and certainly want to visit about that. But first, could we go back and talk a little bit about your early life, where you grew up, your parents, some of those things?
Sure.
Yeah.
I was born in Ardmore, Oklahoma, and then moved after 1 year to Oklahoma City. My dad was retired Army Air Corps. My mom eventually retired from the Oklahoma Publishing Company after going to work there for a Christmas vacation. She quit 20 years later. Graduated from Putnam City High School in 1965. And then,
was your dad career military?
Yes, he was.
So did you, early in your life, did you move around?
Actually, we didn't, because Dad was 55 when I was born, so he had just retired when I was born.
Okay. Well, tell me a little bit. So you went to high school at
Putnam City High School.
Okay. Putnam City Pirates, is that it?
That is correct.
Okay.
In fact, I think one of your teammates, Benny Goodwin, and Jimmy Goodwin.
Jimmy.
Benny and Jimmy and I grew up playing sports together basically from 3rd grade on.
Oh my gosh. Well, what a little bit, can you talk some about your activities, your school activities, community activities growing up as a kid?
Sure. At high school activities, I was on the debate team. I had played all sports in junior high and envisioned myself as being the next great athlete. And my mother said, "You're going to take 1 year of speech." I said, "No, I'm not," but mothers win those arguments. And so I got into speech class, and they started talking about doing poetry and comedic interpretations. And that just wasn't going to be my deal. They said something about debate. So I knew I could argue, at least according to my mom. So I got into debate. That was 6th hour, so I had to give up basketball and football. But I was a baseball player. That was my main sport. So after debate was over, just as baseball season was starting. So I played 4 years of baseball at Putnam City and did debate, and then a lot of the other extracurricular activities in addition to those.
Were there some, from your family and from your activities growing up, were there some principles, some values you learned that helped you with your success later in your life?
Oh, absolutely. Particularly from my debate background, I learned a lot about organization, about critical thinking. I also ended up getting my scholarship here at Oklahoma State University was a debate scholarship. So
not athletics.
Not athletics. I was given the opportunity to walk on the baseball team, or I could get a full scholarship if I debate. So that decision was pretty easy.
Well, did you have any, growing up as a kid, did you do any part-time jobs, work?
I did. I started out sacking groceries at Simpson's grocery store, and after that did some other kind of yard work and things of that nature while I was in high school.
So your sort of the next question would be what influenced you to enroll at Oklahoma State University? But were you recruited?
There were two things that influenced me. One, Dr. Fred Toole, who is the father of Doug Toole, the famous OSU golfer, offered me a full scholarship as a result of my high school career, and two, my lovely wife was coming to Oklahoma State. So not necessarily in that order. That's why I came to OSU.
So you met Jody in high school then?
We did. Jody went to Bishop McGinnis, but we still dated our sophomore, junior, and senior years of high school.
So you had two strong influences.
Yes, I did.
What year did you enroll at Oklahoma State?
Started in the fall of 1965 and lived in Cordell Hall. We had several of us from Putnam City all living in Cordell together, so it was a fun 2 years. Then Jody and I got married between our sophomore and junior year and moved out to the old Vet Village Married Student Housing. That's where we were for the last 2 years.
Okay. What was your major when you enrolled?
I was in political science.
Political science, okay. And did you change that at some time later to pre-law?
No, I knew I wanted to go to law school, but political science, at that point in time, political science was a good degree to have to try to go on to law school.
So you say you knew you wanted to go to law school and you enrolled. Where did that influence you?
That actually, yeah, that actually came from both my debate background and from one of the things I did while I was in high school is I worked in a law firm. I had two different lawyers in my church congregation, and one of them hired me for summer jobs for 2 years, and I really kind of fell in love with what it looked like the practice of law was going to be.
Well, can you share a little bit about some of your undergraduate student experiences, organizations, activities, leadership, things you're involved with?
The debate was probably the one that was most time intensive. I did that for a full 4 years. We had a very successful debate team. My partner and I were the first debate team from Oklahoma State to ever go to the national championship tournament. And we did that both my junior and senior year. Additionally, I was very active in student government, was the majority party leader of the Student Senate my sophomore year, and was in student government with Gary Clark, who now is Burns Hargis' assistant here at OSU. Harry Birdwell was a couple of years behind me. Chick Dombach, who you know very well. We were all in student government together at the same time. I was also the coordinator of a program called Students for Higher Education. We started a lobbying campaign to get more money for higher education. The Students for Higher Education was a statewide organization, and I was in charge of the Oklahoma State University branch of that. Ultimately had a large student rally to draw a lot of publicity for funding for higher education. We did that at the Capitol steps, and at least as about 3 years ago, that was still the largest student rally ever held at the Capitol.
Super. What did you talk about? You worked a little bit in high school. Did you have any part-time jobs as a student at OSU?
Absolutely. Once I proposed to Jody and she accepted, I needed to make some money. So my freshman and sophomore years, I worked in the cafeteria at Cordell Hall. My junior and senior year was a little bit different. My debate coach at Oklahoma State, Dale Stockton, was an ordained minister, and working with Dale through my church, the Disciples of Christ, or the Christian Church, I spent my junior and senior year as the minister of the First Christian Church of Prague, Oklahoma. Their full-time minister had retired. They could not afford to hire a full-time minister, so Jody and I would drive to Prague every Sunday, do Sunday school, youth group, and the church service. So that's how I spent the last 2 years of my employment.
Great, that's exciting. So you and Jody lived in what was known as Vet Village, the old kind of barracks and buildings that Dr. Bennett brought in after World War II.
That's correct.
And we're still there in the
Yes.
60s. Can you describe that experience a little bit?
It was a lot of fun. It's probably the cheapest apartment we will ever have. We had a 2-bedroom furnished, all bills paid, and paid $87 a month. We had my high school debate partner was married and lived 2 units down. One of my very best friends from high school that I played football with in junior high lived on the other side of us, so we all were living there together. The facilities were not the greatest. When our neighbors turned on their bedroom lights, it illuminated our roof. You could literally talk to your neighbors through the wall. So, well, there was some downside to living there, but we just had a great time.
You had your personal conversation. You kind of spoke in quiet tones.
You learned to whisper.
I'd heard a story. You got to tell me this could be possibly true or not. And that one couple lived there in a really hard winter. They had left a pitcher of water on the table. Got in the morning, it was frozen on top.
That easily could have been happening. Yes.
I hear that it was not very well insulated.
They were not well insulated at all.
Leonard, what were some of the favorite student hangouts at that time? This would have been mid '60s.
Probably the Hideaway Pizza, which was at that point sort of the original Hideaway Pizza. Other than that, I didn't hang out a lot because I was on a debate scholarship. I was on an academic scholarship, so the library got a fair amount of my time. The Strip was the other real popular place right around that period of time.
Wish you never went there.
Not that I'll admit to.
Well, let's kind of come back to your debate. Dale Stockton was sort of a legend. Of course, a tragedy later, but had a great debate program. Can you talk a little bit about the debate program at that point?
Absolutely. Dr. Toole was the debate coach our freshman year, and Dr. Krebs was head of the speech department. Dr. Krebs retired. Dr. Toole took that position, and he hired Dale Stockton, one of his former debaters, to be our debate coach. And Dale really escalated the success of the debate program. Dale was, as I said, an ordained minister. He was a classic type A success person. Dale brought in the high school state championship team from Edmond, Oklahoma, who had gone on to college. He recruited them in. We had myself. We probably ultimately had about 10 different people on the debate team, and you work in teams of 2. Dale did a lot to get funding for the program. He worked as a debate coach for the National Bankers Debate Tournament, and he would travel to Dallas and actually work with bankers who were involved in debate. He had us debate all over the campus to gain notoriety and publicity. We brought in, the first year I think we brought in the team from Michigan State and did 2 or 3 debates on campus. My senior year we brought in the Harvard debate team, which ultimately won the national championship, and we debated against them. And their coach is a now very prominent constitutional law professor at Harvard by the name of Lawrence Tribe, who was represented Senator Gore in the Gore-Bush recount down in Florida. So Dale really escalated the visibility and success of the team. We spent my junior and senior year, my partner and I were the #1 team, and we probably spent somewhere between a third and a half of our time on the road. We traveled more than probably any athletic team.
How did the team place nationally overall?
We ended up losing in the national quarterfinals my senior year. Lost we had 9 judges and we lost a 5-4 decision. But had great success throughout the year, and probably if you would do sort of an informal ranking, we would have been ranked in the top 5 in the nation that year.
So great program.
It really was.
And I can see where that certainly paid dividends in your legal profession later.
Yes, it did.
All right. Well, you talked about Dale Stockton. In addition to Dale, were there some other, faculty, administrators, individuals who were influential in your development as a student?
In political science, Harold Sayre, who I had for multiple classes, probably was the one who challenged me the most and the one I remember the most. Very down to earth, but at the same time, very demanding of his students, and I really felt like he pushed me and that it caused me to have a real interest in the area of political science. One that I remember that had absolutely no connection to political science, but just had a great class was a Dr. Hydor, who taught geography. Geography was at that point essentially a required course. Both Jody and I ended up taking him at separate times, and he had such a unique approach to the geography that for whatever reason he always sticks in my mind.
What was his name again?
Dr. Hydor. Hydor, I think was how you spelled it. And then, of course, Dr. Toole was both by getting me here, and then he remained active with the debate program, even though Dale was the head coach. So Fred Toole was also very influential.
Can you share some favorite memories you have of your undergraduate experience at Oklahoma State?
Well, first is I got engaged and married here. So that's the first memory. Proposed to Jody. I think she accepted on the 12th proposal at Theta Pond, and so that's probably my most important memory. The debate program obviously is one. Still have very good lifelong friends. My high school debate partner was here the full 4 years I was, and he's practicing law in Austin, and we continue to stay in touch. The friends that I made living in Cordell Hall, we continued to play intramural sports even after I got married, and those are all pretty much lifelong friends. The athletic programs, we were very, very successful in wrestling. Putnam City at that point in time was something of a wrestling power, so although I had not wrestled in high school, I had a real active interest in wrestling. Actually was the Residence Hall champion in intramural wrestling.
Really?
Yeah.
What weight?
Well, picture me at 167 pounds, if you can. I now weigh about 220. I didn't know. I knew a few moves, and I thought if I could get in the best shape of my life, I'd have a chance. So I would every day go run 3 or 4 miles on the dirt track underneath Gallagher Arena at about the same time the wrestlers were running. So I really enjoyed the wrestling program. Went to watch the national championship tournament in Ames, Iowa, my freshman year. The football team on which you played was always a lot of fun. And
Back beat OU.
That's right.
So did you enjoy your Monday off?
I absolutely did. And then, of course, Mr. Iba was still coaching basketball. Our program wasn't overwhelmingly successful at that point, but just listening to him, and you could hear him all over the gym.
Let's see, what was his favorite phrase?
Well, I
cut that out.
Yeah, cut that out. Or in
one of
one of my favorites, we had a player on the team, and I think his name was Fett Getter. And every time he'd take a shot that he'd miss, you could hear, "Fett Getter, quit shooting." So.
Cut that out. So, Leonard, what year did you graduate then?
Graduated 1969.
69, okay. And you then you attended law school?
That's correct.
Can you talk a little bit about, was it Harvard?
It was Harvard Law School.
Some small school
Yes,
like
a small unknown school in Boston.
Can you share, I mean, one, how did you get accepted, and which is great, and then a little bit about your experiences
Sure.
there?
I think the debate really had a lot to debate, and then academics and extracurricular activities were the three things that really helped with getting into Harvard Law School. They also have a national, what they call the LSAT, national test that you take, and for whatever reason the day I took it, everything seemed to click. But I really had no anticipation of being accepted to Harvard. I had been accepted to Duke, which is also a very good law school. Duke had a full scholarship for an ROTC graduate, and I was Air Force ROTC when I was here. Once I got accepted at Harvard, I sort of stopped the application process at Duke. I was about halfway through it and got notified that summer that I had gotten the full scholarship to Duke. And so Jody and I had to make a decision: do we take the full scholarship or do we take the name? And we decided to go with the Harvard, and it's worked out well. But really, the college debate program had an awful lot to do with it. There were probably 7 or 8 of us that from different schools that were on the debate tour that all got accepted the year that I did, and I think that was very helpful. We spent 3 years there. My first year, I worked part-time as the assistant debate coach at Boston College. The head debate coach was then Bob, now Robert Shrum, who has run 8 separate Democratic presidential campaigns. The other assistant debate coach was Lawrence Tribe, who was already a professor, and he was a former national debate champion in addition to being the debate coach at Harvard. So I got some pretty good training from those two gentlemen while I was working there.
So some of your experiences in law school, you can share some of those?
Sure. My first year, quite frankly, I was a little burned out. And as we were in law school, at least at that point in time, you only had one exam. It was at the end of the year. And as we were getting to the end of the year, I had probably watched more ice hockey than I had spent time studying. The Boston Bruins won the Stanley Cup with Bobby Orr that year. The farm club before the Boston Bruins was the original Oklahoma City Blazers. And so about half the team that was playing in Boston I had seen live in Oklahoma City. Another one of the debaters and I, we, by our count, watched 82 hockey games on TV. So as we're coming up to finals, I'm getting worried, and then President Nixon essentially saved my career by invading Cambodia. The students at Harvard decided to protest the invasion of Cambodia, and the protest was, we refuse to take our final exams. And much to everybody's surprise, our law school professors went along with it and gave us take-home exams. So I had until August the 15th to complete my take-home exams, and that's essentially how I ended up getting fairly good grades my first year. The extracurriculars that I participated in at Harvard really centered in 2 different areas. I co-authored 2 notes that were published in Harvard law-type journals, one in what was called the Journal of Legislation, and one in the Civil Rights, Civil Liberties Law Review. They were sort of, my co-author, a guy by the name of Charlie Harris, who now is practicing law in Florida, he and I wrote one of the very first articles on the constitutionality of campaign finance limits. And then the other thing that I did was moot court. Our program at Harvard is called the Ames Moot Court Competition. At that point in time, it was, and still is, a 3-year competition. as a freshman, everybody started out. You would have teams of 6 or more, but basically your first year you would break into teams of 2, and so you would argue against teams from other clubs. There were clubs named after prominent jurists. And our team was successful enough to move to the semifinals, which was then held the second year. There we had 6 of us writing a brief, 2 who did the oral argument, and I was one of the 2 who did the oral argument. And we had if I recall right, 2 federal circuit court judges and 1 district court judge who heard that particular round, and we were lucky enough to win that round. By third year then, in the finals, again, 6 of us writing a brief, and a 3-person panel, Justice Harry Blackmun, famous for Roe versus Wade, Judge Shirley Hofstadler from the Ninth Circuit, who became the first Secretary of Education under Jimmy Carter, and Judge Oaks, who was the Chief Judge of the Second Circuit. And our team was the winning team, and I was lucky enough to be selected as the outstanding oral arguer for the entire competition.
Fantastic.
It was a lot of fun.
Yeah. So, did you involved on the law review?
I did not do the law review itself. I did the other 2 journals that I talked about: Civil Rights, Civil Liberties Law Review, and the Journal on Legislation. I worked on both of those 2.
So when you graduated in 72?
1972.
1972, and at that point, were you looking for? I mean, were you as Roy? Were you looking to come back to Oklahoma, or were you looking just for the best offer?
Well, the story on that goes to a prominent Oklahoma State alum by the name of Dean Stringer. I was already in the United States Air Force as a result of my Air Force ROTC commitment when I went to law school. So I knew I was going to be going into the Air Force for 4 years, but there was going to be a delay. I had looked at job interviews, New York, Washington, D.C., Boston, all along the East Coast, and there was a firm called Crowe and Dunlevy, who was from Oklahoma City. I didn't know anything about the firm other than they were located here. But I thought, they're from Oklahoma, I might as well go interview.
But again, you really didn't have any strong interest necessarily.
No, I really didn't, one way or the other. Okay. I met Dean Stringer, who is a former president of the Alumni Association, former president of the OSU Foundation, and former regent. Dean was
president of the Student Government Association.
Exactly, president of the Student Government Association. Dean was doing the interviews, and I walked in, and his first words were, "I see you're from OSU, let's go get a cup of coffee and talk football." And I knew right then that's the guy I wanted to work with. So I got out of law school in '72, and I knew I was going in the Air Force within the next year. So I did not immediately take the bar exam, which is generally held in June. And I worked with the firm for approximately 1 year, and then was called to active duty in July of 1973. Was in the Air Force then from 1973 to 1977, and then came back with Crowe and Dunlevy in 1977, and have worked there ever since.
Where were you assigned?
I was assigned initially at Lackland Air Force Base, which is the basic training base that's in San Antonio, Texas. I was there for 3 years. While I was there, I was lucky enough to be selected to be part of a new program called the Area Defense Council. The military branches essentially created the equivalent of a public defender system for the military, so that certain select attorneys were taken out of the base office, were no longer subject to any command from the base, were subject to command only from headquarters United States Air Force, and we were basically told to go open up our own law firm and practice criminal defense law. So I did that for about 2 to 2.5 years. Then at the end of that, I was transferred to the Judge Advocate School in Maxwell Air Force Base in Montgomery, Alabama. In order to be certified to do court-martial work, you have to graduate from that school. It's a 6-week course, plus they also do courses for judges and other advanced type courses. And I was selected there essentially to teach trial practice. So in that 4-year term, I probably got to try somewhere around 80 to 90 jury trials, which was very helpful to me when I came back into private practice.
So then you came back to Crowe Dunlevy in what year did you say?
1977.
77, okay. Well, can you kind of we've had a long career, so to say, summarize, maybe review, kind of some highlights of your professional career, your legal career with
Sure.
Crowe Dunlevy?
What I do is called labor and employment law. I represent companies when they get sued for discrimination, when they have issues with labor union problems, wage and hour problems, or occupational safety and health act issues. When I came out of the Air Force, our firm really didn't do that kind of work. We had one person who did traditional labor union type work, but the rest of it we kind of didn't do. And my original goal was to try to build enough of that practice so I could do it at least half-time. Now we've got 19 attorneys that do it pretty much full-time. So I've been lucky enough to help build that practice. I have been active both within the legal profession and then also have attempted to do so in community affairs. Right now I sit as the chair of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Wage, Hour, and Leave Subcommittee, so that all changes in our federal statutes that deal with wage and hour problems, Family and Medical Leave Act, and those kind of things flow through my committee. So I spend a fair amount of time in Washington, D.C. working on behalf of the Chamber or with the Chamber with people from Congress and from the White House on federal legislation. I was inducted into what is called the College of Labor and Employment Lawyers, I think in 1996. It's kind of the Hall of Fame of labor and employment lawyers, and I was in the second class. It was only created in 1995, so I was lucky enough to be selected as one of the very original members of that. Also, I have been selected to be in several publications that honor lawyers across the country. There's a set of publications called The Best Lawyers in America, and I've been in it for over 20 years. Last year, for the first time, they started selecting somebody who was the best in their profession in individual metropolitan areas, and so I was picked as the best labor and employment lawyer in the city of Oklahoma City, which was the first time that designation had ever been offered. Also, I've been in Who's Who in American Lawyers, Who's Who in the United States, Who's Who in the world. And as you know, active at Oklahoma State, probably the biggest honor I think I've received was being inducted into the Alumni Hall of Fame 3 or 4 years ago.
Well, let's just kind of use that as a segue into the next set of questions about Oklahoma State. You served many years in numerous leadership roles, for example, the Alumni Association that you mentioned, including your tenure as national president. Stepping back, you recall, what years did you serve on the board? Not on the leadership council, but on the board, and then as president?
Okay, I was president, I think, 95, 96.
Right.
So I would have been on the executive committee, I believe, the year before that, and served on the national board, I think, probably it would have been around 93 to up until the time I was president.
Yeah. Let me step back a minute, because I just recall, you served as chapter president of the Oklahoma County chapter.
That's correct.
And that is where you kind of started. What was the chapter doing in those days? What were 2 or 3 key things that you
Well, the big thing we did was student recruitment.
Mm-hmm.
We would hold a large dinner, try to bring in individuals from various schools around the Oklahoma City metropolitan area, and put on essentially a student recruitment type program. We also tried to raise money for scholarships as part of that program, but had a large focus on that. We would do, as they still do today, watch parties for the away games. Those were probably the 2 principal things that we did at that period of time.
It's kind of where you got your start and then moved up to the national.
Yeah, that's exactly correct.
Well, do you remember who some of the people you work with, Leonard, just kind of on the board of directors with you on your leadership team as president?
That's a good question.
At the risk of
that's fine. I will tell you sort of the people I relied on. I'm not sure I would call them the leadership team. I mean, other than, of course, yourself, Larry Shell, that were the full-time employees. But Charles Baggett, Charlie was a former president just a few years before I was. His son is a very good friend and fraternity brother of my oldest son, Chris. Jack Griffith was very influential and a great sounding board for a lot of the things that I would work with. sort of coming up behind me, Kirk Jewell was beginning to get active in the Alumni Association around that period of time. He was active at the Oklahoma City area, and so I was trying to help Kirk sort of move up into the national area. And so those were some of the people that I
was Ike Glass.
Oh, absolutely, and I don't know how I forget to mention Ike. Ike Glass was and still is a great contributor to Oklahoma State, great contributor to the Alumni Association. And then I would be wrong if I didn't say Dean Stringer. Even though Dean was emeritus as a former president, he was still on the board. Dean and I would spend just about 15 minutes every day talking about something about OSU, whether we were coaching football or talking about the Alumni Association.
We started back with your first interview.
Absolutely.
Well, Leonard, what do you remember? What during your time as president? What were some of the key issues? Some of the major goals that you had at that time. Do you recall?
Well,
planning a little bit later.
The strategic planning was really just sort of started with Jack Griffith, and so a lot of what I wanted to do was sort of carry on what was going on. I'm not a big believer in reinventing the wheel if the wheel seems to be rolling right. We were also looking at the finances of the Alumni Association, how we could the Affinity credit card was sort of in that period of time. Growing membership was very important, and we had begun having discussions, although they probably predated me, about the Alumni Center that ultimately came to fruition some several years later through your great leadership.
Can you? I think it was maybe a couple years actually after you'd actually stepped out as president, but you served in the leadership role with the strategic planning process at that. Can you talk a little bit about the strategic planning process and some of the priority objectives that come out of that?
Sure. As with any organization, one of the problems that often happens when you turn over leadership as often as we do in the Alumni Association is that everything seems to run in sort of a one-year cycle. And then oftentimes you go back and you'll be talking about the same topic you were talking about the year before. And so we began a strategic planning process to sort of look forward more than 1 year to try to get together a lot of the people that we thought would be very influential and also contribute some really good ideas, and put together a strategic planning team to try to get like a 4 or 5 year strategic plan, and to look at how we could best guarantee the long-term future of the Alumni Association. And I think if we were to pull out that old strategic plan, I think you'd find that it worked pretty well.
Do you remember what some of the, we use the term, overarching priorities that come out of that?
Well, certainly the Alumni Association building was certainly one of them. Funding and growing leadership, or growing membership was one of them. And also, I think, if I recall right, moving more toward independence from the university. At that point in time, we were in the period where we were getting a lot of funding from the university, and we began trying to sort of move away from that so that we were a separate and independent organization and not dependent upon the university and the university administration, which allowed us to service a more independent voice for the alumni.
Well, you talk about the Alumni Center, which finally became the ConocoPhillips OSU Alumni Center. Can you explain why this emerged as a priority, and how did the strategic team feel about the need for Alumni Center?
Well, at that point in time, in the mid-'90s, as we had been for a long time, we were housed in the student union, and frankly, we were pretty much landlocked. We had offices. I say we. You were the one that had to suffer through this, but you had offices on multiple floors within the student union, and the organization itself was really beginning to grow. We needed more staff, and there just, quite frankly, wasn't enough space for the staff. So that was one thing we needed, was a place where we could increase staff. But as importantly, or maybe even more importantly, we really didn't have any place to display the success and tradition of our great alums. We had some plaques on the wall for who had been in the Hall of Fame or had perhaps been distinguished alums, but really no place to sort of have a large display the way we do in the current ConocoPhillips building. And so both to deal with the staff level issues, to display the tradition, and to give somebody a real physical focal point where they can not only hear about the Alumni Association but see it.
Place together and kind of be home on campus.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. So those were the three things that I remember most in terms of the concept before it actually became the reality.
I think somebody referred to this as kind of a Cecil B. DeMille's film, years in the making and cast of thousands.
Absolutely.
And so
Absolutely.
Kind of leads my next question. And you provide a key leadership role. I mean, from the fundraising campaign through design and construction. I think you made some of the trips where you visited, other alumni centers across the country. Can you talk about your participation and your thoughts on the process?
Absolutely. I still vividly remember when I got a call from you and Kirk Jewell to ask me if I would head up the process of the alumni building, and like an idiot I said yes, and I think you and I have both opined if we'd known what we were getting into, who knows what we would have said. But it was a great experience for me. The roles that I enjoyed the most, I think I would say, is one sort of dealing with the selection and working with the architect, because my oldest son has a bachelor's and master's in architecture, so that I was able to actually talk his language for a change and bounce some ideas off him, and it really sort of helped us. We were very close, but he was always having to listen to my profession. Now I was getting to learn about his, and we were very fortunate to have a great design architect from the University of Texas. But going through that whole process of selecting the individuals that were going to fill that role was really pretty exciting for me, because we had several prominent firms from around the United States who wanted to do this building, and I think most of us were surprised at that level. Fundraising was a challenge, but I still remember that the firm we hired to come in and do the feasibility study, if I recall correctly, said we would probably max out at around $8 million, and we far exceeded that because of the good hard work of you and our fundraising committee and the generosity of our alums that wanted to give to this project. And then the other thing I'm sure you remember, we found out we were over budget and we had to do some cuts, and that was a very interesting process. One of the humorous memories that I will always have, though, of that process was we had gone to Austin to visit the architect. We were trying to get back on the plane. I think Clayton Taylor was on that trip, I'm not sure, but somebody else was with me, and you got stopped at the security gate, and they searched your bag like 3 or 4 times, and we were just having a ball at your expense over you having the terrorist attack approach. So that was one of the fun things I remember, was our trip to Austin to look at their facilities.
Leonard, how did, sort of a general question to think about, in your opinion, how did the Alumni Association change, and how was it different after implementing some of these, after the Alumni Center implementing some of the goals that you talked about? How did, in a more independent time from the Alumni Association, how did they sort of change the focus and direction of the association?
I think it changed in probably 3 ways. First, I think beginning before me, but certainly from after I left on, I think that you had a different kind of person serving on the board. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that is we had people who were who have gone on to be CEOs of their companies, who brought a real business approach, who were really committed, who were really working hard time. And I don't mean to say anything negative about those who came before us, but I think there was something of I don't call it an honorary position, but I think that the sort of intensity of commitment to the leadership of the Alumni Association changed during that period of time. We had people who came in who were leaders, or who were in positions to grow into leaders and have done so within their particular industry or profession. And so that's the first thing. I think you've captured some of the very top OSU alums and been able to persuade them to serve both on what's now the Leadership Council and in leadership positions. And I think that change has reflected in a lot of the other things that have occurred. I think, quite frankly, I think the stature of the Alumni Association on campus and away from campus, both because of your leadership and because of the Alumni Center, is much more prominent than it was. I think we have had more success attracting and developing programs of our alums outside the state of Oklahoma. And I think the independence has also helped us, frankly, work through some kind of touchy issues from time to time, in terms of our relationships with whoever the president was, or what hot issues were on campus. Having that independence has allowed us to make decisions without anything hanging over our head, and I think that's worked very well for the Alumni Association.
You've been associated with the Alumni Association, looked at it in a lot of different ways, participated in a lot of activities and events. What are some of your favorite programs?
I would say homecoming has to rank very high. It is the best homecoming in the United States. For the last 2 years, Jody and I have had the honor and privilege of driving one of the judges around on Friday night as they're judging the homecoming decorations at the fraternities and sororities.
And when you do that, and when you ride in the parade, do you want to kind of describe your vehicle?
Yeah. Both as president-elect and president have been in the homecoming parade, and I drive a 1976 Chevrolet Impala that is OSU orange, black interior with the OSU embroidered on all 4 doors, both seats, and it has become, legend may be too strong a word, but I am known all over the United States for that car. The last time we were at the Alamo Bowl, parked a fair ways from the stadium, and after the game came back and had a business card from one of my clients who said, "Leonard, I parked next to your car so I could find my car after the game." With our youngest son lives in the Dallas area, and there's a large discount mall in Allen, probably has 50 or 60 stores. So we go down to the discount mall when we visit Brooke and our daughter-in-law and 2 granddaughters, and we're parked sort of in the middle of the parking lot one time, come out, and there are Japanese tourists taking pictures of my car. So that whole homecoming activity, and just I've done the walk around myself where I walk, but being with the judges and sort of stopping and having time to look around, it's just amazing at the number of people who come to homecoming. And 2 years ago, Jody and I had to go back to Oklahoma City, and after we were through with that on Friday night, and driving out of town, it was just a stream of cars. You would have thought there was a football game going on that night. This year, the weather was not that great. We'd had a rainstorm before. There was concern about how many people were going to come out, and as we were finishing the drive back to the building with the judge, we looked back up the street, and it was just a sea of people. So it's the homecoming certainly ranks up there. Our Hall of Fame induction, it's always wonderful to recognize the wonderful talents that have come through Oklahoma State, and honor them and have them honor us by accepting those. And quite frankly, I like what is now the Leadership Council meetings. It used to be the board meetings. You get to meet people from all over the state. You make lifelong friends. You get to hear about what's going on at Oklahoma State, and you get to do some things to help pay back Oklahoma State for the many wonderful things they've done for us.
In your opinion, why is it so important for alumni to remain engaged with their alma mater?
To me, the education of our young people is the key to our future, and particularly in today's economy, state funding is not going to begin to be enough to give this generation and the next generation the kind of educational opportunities we had. The cost of tuition has clearly escalated. There was a young lady who spoke at the President's Club OSU Foundation meeting 2 weeks ago, right before the Baylor game, that I thought put it best. She said that, as she heard about these things that were going to scholarships, people kept using the word donation, and she didn't like that. She said, "I think you ought to use the word investment, because that's really what it is. It's an investment in our students." So I think for the future of our state, for the future of our nation, we need to stay involved on not just a financial basis, but giving our time and paying back. I could never begin to repay Oklahoma State for all of the things it did for me. It gave me a wife, it gave me a career, and it gave me a place to come back probably 16 to 20 times, 20 weekends a year to have a great time with the athletic teams and the academic programs and things of that nature. Also, when I was a student, I wanted to have some reassurance that being at Oklahoma State was going to help me. And I think alums can come back and be sort of the showcase to students for the kind of success you can have because of the foundations that were built at Oklahoma State. I was lucky enough to get to go to Harvard. Jody got a degree here in microbiology, but also had a love of English while she was here. She got a master's degree at Boston College. She got another degree at Auburn. Our oldest son got his bachelor's degree in architecture here, went to the University of Washington, St. Louis, one of the top architecture schools, and was more than able to compete with the Harvards, the Michigans. He was selected to be one of 2 foreign exchange students out of the entire school to go to Scotland for a semester. So I think kind of showing off those successes and letting the students know that this is a foundation from which you can build a great success is also very important.
Kind of generally looking at the Alumni Association, what should be the mission and purposes of the Alumni Association?
Our former president, Jim Halligan, I think, had the phrase that the foundation was fundraising and the Alumni Association was people raising, or something along those lines. Friend raising. And I think that is a good description of what the Alumni Association should be about. It should be both a place where we as an organization are making the effort to contact and bring back people who have not been active. And I can tell you that having brought people back to campus who haven't been here 10 or 15 years, they don't know the campus. It has changed so much. They are amazed and they want to be engaged. So I think that's the first thing is we serve as a way to go out and recruit those who've come before us but haven't been active. It also gives the central or focal point to allow people to remain involved. The foundation will allow you to give money, and if you're on the various board of governors, you can be active, but that's kind of limited. The Alumni Association just provides so many different avenues that allow somebody to continue to be involved, whether it be with student recruitment, whether it be working with one of our committees like the Committee for Oversight of the ConocoPhillips Alumni Building. And so I think it's important to have that avenue there for people to be involved in the association, and it also provides the contacts where you can connect with, have the orange connection with others around the country. I mean, everywhere I go, I run into people who are Alumni Association members, and it gives me an easy access to whatever community it is. So I think those would be the three things I would say would be the mission.
You touched on this a little bit earlier, but might I ask you again, how do you feel about the organizational structure currently, the Alumni Association, its relationship with the university? And you want to speak to that? Sure.
I think that our current organizational structure gives us sort of the independence from the university, but we are partners, is exactly what we need to have. It places some burdens on us in terms of fundraising and budgeting that we didn't have when we were getting a substantial portion of the money from the university, but I think it's well worth the price. The separateness of the organization allows us to take an independent look at issues that are going on campus and not just serve as sort of a mouthpiece for the president or the Board of Regents. And I think sometimes having that separate view is very valuable to the university, because we have been fortunate to have presidents and leaders who've been willing to listen to the Alumni Association and more often than not, I think, accept our views on a lot of critical issues.
What was the term you guys were using at that time? Is a voice of alumni?
Yes.
Kind of to be an independent voice. unfiltered kind of voice of how alumni feel back to the university.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it allowed us to give feedback to the university without having any kind of concern that we were going to have a loss of funding or loss of cooperation from the university.
Can you share some, you talked about so many of them, but there's some special memories that you recall in your time with the Alumni Association that stand out in your mind?
Sure. Well, I think the first one is the ConocoPhillips building. That process of working with you and Larry Shell and all the great volunteers from within the Alumni Association to see that project go from concept to reality was one of the best times I've ever had in my life. We had a lot of challenges. We had a lot of people telling us we could not accomplish it. And like good OSU Cowboys, we were able to show them they were wrong. And I think the assistance of both Harry Birdwell, who was then with the administration, and President Halligan were critical in achieving both the location of the building and its success. Being inducted into the Hall of Fame, as I said, is probably one of the high points of my life, and so I have to point to that as being critical. Working with you was and continues to be just an enormous pleasure. I consider you a good friend. We were in school at around the same time, and so it's been kind of fun to watch us grow old together. And then the friendships that I've made, lifelong friendships, like an Ike Glass or like a Charlie Baggett, people who I would not have otherwise crossed paths with, but for the Alumni Association, have just been invaluable.
And how do you feel about the future of the Alumni Association?
I'm very optimistic about the Alumni Association. We've had some budgetary constraints, as any organization has had in this difficult economy, but we seem to be working our way through it. We have some great leaders on the horizon. As I look at the people who are sort of in leadership now, or who I sort of see working their way up the leadership ladder, I think we've got some great prospects for people to help run the organization. I think we continue, even under President Harris's administration, to have a role at the university, to have a prominent role in many of the decisions that have gone on. We've still got some very difficult challenges ahead of us, but I'm confident we'll be able to deal with those.
Is there anything kind of looking forward to your experience and looking back, think current, kind of moving forward with the Alumni Association? What, in your opinion, does the Alumni Association need to continue to do, and what will it need to do differently in the future to continue to grow and provide the service that they want to?
I think one of the things we have to continue to do, and I think we now have sort of the new social media tools to do it, is to continue to try to be in contact with those people who are not active. Let them know the opportunities they're missing. As importantly, let them know they're wanted. With me, for instance, I probably, after I got out of law school, it probably went 4 or 5 years without hearing anything, until sort of Dean Stringer started saying, "Why don't you get involved in the Alumni Association?" I think the Alumni Association has now put in place great programs with the students to start getting the student interest before they graduate. We've got to continue to follow up, I think, with that. So that's the first thing. I think we've got to use our student programs. We've got to use the Facebook, the Twitter, the social media, which is the way that people of that age communicate, to continue to tell people why they ought to be with the Alumni Association. I like our current organizational structure. I think that we have to continue using that organizational structure to tackle the challenges that we're going to have. The one thing, I don't know if I'd say I would do it differently, but I think we do have to emphasize to our current members what the benefits of being a member are, because there are a lot of things I get as a member, whether it be discounts at merchants, whether it be special programs I can attend, and I think sometimes we take for granted that people understand those, and not a lot of people, frankly, know those are available. So I think we need to continue to remind people so that we can maintain our current base of why they need to be in the Alumni Association and what they get out of the Alumni Association. whether it be, as I said, the discounts or, for instance, the use of the ConocoPhillips building. When I'm on campus as an alum, I can go into the building and there's an area of the building where I can hook up my computer, I can do business. Those are the kind of things that people may not know about that we need to publicize.
You know, we've been talking about, you know, the Alumni Association, but you've also been, through the Alumni Association, in other ways, affiliated with the university. And I wanted to just ask you a little bit, how do you feel about where the university's at right now?
I feel really good about where we're at. I think we're producing a very high quality of student. Our law firm is one of the 2 largest in the state of Oklahoma, and we recruit only the top graduates out of law schools both in Oklahoma and some of the top law schools around the country. And we have been, for the last probably 10 years, hiring an awful lot of Oklahoma State undergraduates. Just top-class men and women who have had great academic opportunities and achievements here, gone on to be very successful in law school because the university is preparing them well for the rigors of what my profession has. So that's the first thing. I think in my profession, we're turning out good people. I think our continued emphasis on things like the Fulbright Scholarship, Fulbright program, and those types of programs has been very, very positive for the university. I like that we focus on sort of the valedictorian approach to some of the smaller communities, so that we're bringing in not just people from metropolitan areas, but continuing to do our land grant mission. So I think we are out in a lot of counties, and that's very helpful. Our success in the Branding for Success fundraising campaign, I think, speaks volumes as to the fact that we're really headed in the right direction. We have people.
You diverge me. What do you think about the campaign? I can hardly say the word, $1 billion campaign.
When I was there for the first announcement, and I thought I misheard it when they first announced it, but I think we'll reach the goal through the leadership of a lot of people, starting with President Hargis, Kirk Jewell, obviously Mr. Pickens, but a lot of others, and in many respects, people who haven't given before or given that much are really stepping up. At the foundation, I'm on the foundation board of governors, and at a recent meeting, they gave out the numbers of people who are now giving to OSU as compared to what were 10 years ago, and it's just amazing. Not the growth in dollars, but the growth in people. And I quite frankly credit the Alumni Association for a lot of that, because many of those contacts are people who have been contacted or courted by the Alumni Association, and we've brought them back into the fold. So I think from a fundraising standpoint, I think academically we're attracting incredible professors. We've started a new entrepreneurs program in the College of Business. I've heard the head of that program speak. He is so good that we're bringing him in to be the keynote speaker for the State Human Resources Convention next year, and that will give OSU a lot of notoriety in that profession. So I think we're certainly headed in the right direction.
What do you think about President Burns Hargis' leadership?
I am very pleased with
now, caveat is he was an attorney earlier in his career, right?
Absolutely.
Having said that.
Having said that, no, I've known Burns for probably 25 or 30 years, both of us being attorneys, both of us being OSU alums, and I think he's doing a magnificent job. Between Jody and I, we know numerous faculty members up here. His relationship with the faculty seems to be very good. And obviously his ability to raise funds and raise our profile has been critical in terms of the fundraising program that we're having. So I think he's doing an excellent job, and a lot of people are very pleased that he decided to accept the position.
What do you think his strengths are as a leader?
I would say that Burns' strengths are number one, his ability to deal with people. This was the sort of this, Burns didn't like this being a Republican, but it was sort of the same strength that President Bill Clinton had. People say that when President Clinton walked into a room of 1,000 people, when he talked to you, you felt like you were the only person in the room. I think Burns has a lot of that same kind of charisma about him. Number two, he has contacts. He is spent a life of public service in addition to his role as an attorney and a banker, and he knows people everywhere, and I think that's been very, very helpful to Oklahoma State. Three, he surrounds himself with good people. He is not afraid to have people on his leadership team who will challenge him, and I think he does a very good job of surrounding himself with high-quality people to accomplish the mission that he set out to try to achieve.
There's something called athletics at Oklahoma State. I know you love athletics, Leonard, and been involved in many ways and help with campaigns and et cetera. Well, how you feeling about the direction of athletics at Oklahoma State?
Well, clearly our record of success is continuing to grow. I think the continued fundraising is going to be necessary. I want to see us complete the athletic village. It's unfortunate that some of the minor sports got caught in the economic crunch. I'm a huge tennis player, as you know. Coach James Wadley and I go all the way back to high school at church camp. James gave me my very first tennis lesson, hit me in the nose with a tennis ball, so I still remember that. James used to stay at my house in Oklahoma City when he would play high school tournaments. And for the first time, we're building new tennis courts. That was just approved very recently, so I'm glad to see that. I'm a huge baseball fan. My youngest son, as you know, Jerry, is a high school baseball coach. He played at K-State, but did get his degree from Oklahoma State. And I want to see us, try to help fund some of the minor sports where we are beginning to have a lot of success. Our cross country team is ranked number 2 in the nation right now. Our women's soccer team is in the final 16 and playing Duke. So I think our athletic program is finally getting some of the funding that will help the coaches we have be successful. We have had, I don't know whether it was a run of luck or it was excellent judgment by our athletic directors, but we have had incredible success in terms of the quality of people that we bring in as coaches and their ability to accomplish a lot with a little. So now by giving them better funding and better facilities, I think we are only going to see greater success.
How do you see that balance between academics and athletics playing out? Some people feel, well, athletics maybe doesn't have or shouldn't have as large a role as it has in the university. Some people feel strongly about that. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I go back to when I was president of the university. We went to the Final Four with Big Country and Randy Rutherford. And if I recall right, donations to the university that next year increased by like 150%. And I think, whether we like it or not, athletic success does translate into academic funding. And so I think you've got to have an emphasis on the athletics. I think President Hergus, though, is doing a very good job of publicizing our academic successes. I go, as you know, I travel a lot, and when I come into the Will Rogers Airport at Oklahoma City, there are signs there talking about how our engineering program has won national contests. So we're beginning to sort of publicize the successes that those of us at the university know about, but that we haven't in the past always trumpeted the way we trumpet the athletic program. I also think that the matching program that Mr. Pickens has put in place as part of the branding success is going to help emphasize the raising of scholarship money for our students, and that's just going to keep bringing us higher and higher quality high school students.
Leonard, your professional success and your contributions to Oklahoma State, over the years have been greatly appreciated by your alma mater and acknowledged. You've mentioned the Hall of Fame, but can you talk about some of the recognition you received and what they mean to you personally?
Sure. Within the Alumni Association, I was a distinguished alumni, and then about 10 years later, the Hall of Fame, and I've already spoken to how important the Hall of Fame is to me. And it's my identification with OSU within my profession. It is literally known all over the United States. People talk about my orange car at meetings in California and Texas and Florida. For instance, I am on a American Bar Association committee that meets every March, and it's usually there's a golf or tennis tournament with it. about 3 years ago, I'm out on the golf course with my orange and black shoes, my orange and black attire, my orange and black golf bag, and playing about 4 holes over a friend of mine, and in his foursome, the guy points and says, "Who's that guy over there in the orange and black?" To which my friend replies, "Everybody knows it's Leonard." So being tied to Oklahoma State is very important. I have had the honor of being allowed to teach in the College of Business as an adjunct, and actually have taught students who now work in various government agencies with whom I deal. So now, I'm dealing with my students in their professional role, and so that's helpful because I already have familiarity with them. I just hope I gave them a good grade, since they get to make decisions about some of my clients at this point. And then working with the foundation, I'm now in my third 6-year term as being on the Board of Governors, and being able to kind of help the university with some of its fundraising programs is always very satisfying.
You were active with the OSU posse?
Yeah, I've been a member of the posse, worked with some of the Oklahoma County functions. So Jody and I have been active in just about every organization you can have. I was one of the founding organizers of the Iba Fenimore Society within the athletic department, and still serve as a member of that board of directors. So I've been active with the alumni, with the foundation, with academics, and with the athletics program.
We talked about it, maybe you bring it up again. President of the OSU Alumni Association, over 200,000 living alumni. To be the top guy, top dog, pretty special. And Oklahoma County, which was by far our largest, of course, chapter of the Alumni Association, president of that organization. And these opportunities, and I say in quotes, some of them were opportunities that you had, must have been special to you.
Oh, absolutely. I wanted to be active in the Alumni Association, in large part because of Dean Stringer, and I'd seen what Dean had done. He was and still is a mentor to me in a lot of things, and so having the opportunity to get involved first at the county level, which I think is very important because that kind of gives you the grassroots of the people around you. Also, it allowed me to get involved with high school students. My wife is a teacher, so that was helpful to sort of have that crossover. Never dreamed I would be president of the Alumni Association at the national level, and that was it was a challenge, but it was quite an honor, and gave me the opportunity to make a contribution both to the association and the university at what I think was a pretty important time.
You're maybe I'll phrase this as a question. Why are you so loyal and passionate, loyal to and passionate about Oklahoma State University, and why have you given so much of your time, your talents, your resources over the years? I mean, literally hundreds and hundreds of man hours, and of course you've been very generous in supporting different things. I mean, where does that passion come from?
Well, it traces back to when I was a student. I mean, one thing that I think OSU is I don't want to say unique, but it's pretty close. When you're a student here, you develop a passion for this institution. Oklahoma State University was the foundation for what successes I've had in life, and I can never repay that. Dale Stockton, who is my debate coach, other than my dad, is probably the most important male in my life. Completely made an adult out of me, transformed me, not just as a debater, but as a person. In fact, our first son's middle name is Dale, named after my debate coach. So the passion started pretty early, and I have 3 sons, all of whom ultimately graduated from here. I now have 5 grandchildren, and I'm hoping that the vast majority of them will see their way through here. And I want them to be able to have the same opportunity or a better opportunity than I did. Plus, I think Oklahoma State is critical to the success of the state of Oklahoma. The programs that we offer, not just to students, but to businesses through our outreach with the College of Business, to our agricultural, through Vet Med, all of those kind of things are programs that are important to bringing Oklahoma forward. And I'm proud to be an Oklahoman. Oklahoma City continues to be topping the charts these days. Forbes magazine just labeled it the least expensive major metropolitan area in the United States. It's like second in growth in jobs, and I think a lot of that comes from that Oklahoma State Cowboy attitude and experience.
What, out of all the years, all the memories you have over the years, are there some of them that just stand out more than others? I mean, some special times to
Oh,
you?
yeah, I absolutely. Seeing my sons graduate, I mean, separate and apart from the experience that Jody and I here, seeing our sons graduate from here was incredibly special to us. Going to the Final Four 2 times, we've made both of those trips. Breaking ground for the Alumni Association building and then opening the doors were major experiences for me. And watching the transition from president to president, quite frankly, has been an interesting process to see different perspectives on how to lead the university and different approaches, but each of them bringing a success in a different way to the university. As an undergraduate, gosh, I guess my debate experience, particularly getting to go to the national championship tournament 2 times, winning several nationally prominent tournaments during the course of the years, but if I have to, the most important was finally getting Jody to say yes, so that our experience in the first 2 years of our marriage being spent here was just spectacular.
Think on this just a minute, Leonard. This is a serious question. How do you hope people remember Leonard Court? You know, how do you want to be remembered?
Sure. I think I want to be remembered as a good father. I want to be somebody in my profession who is viewed as being ethical and was viewed as making a contribution. Jody and I have sort of talked about how do we want to be remembered, and quite frankly, for us, our legacy is our children. We have 3 sons who've been very successful, who have wonderful families. And then, certainly last but not least, they'll probably put me in the ground in some kind of orange outfit. I've told Jody that. I want to be remembered as somebody who loved Oklahoma State University.
Appreciate it. Leonard, if we missed anything that you want to talk about, or bring up, or your association university that you want to mention?
No, I think you've covered it all, Jerry.
Thank you.